Okay, let me see. I was trying to turn on some music. I accidentally got my computer turned off while I was getting set up, so unfortunately it took me a minute to get everything back up, but I haven't looked at the chapter. I already knew what was happening in the Four Knights and the Eden Zero chapter, so I went and looked through those. I'm very stoked for the next couple chapters of Four Knights for sure. The new Shiki form, extremely hype. I already said I think it's. I would have to say out of the new gen main characters, that has to be the coolest form. It just looks badass. The return of long haired Shiki, which I've been wanting since the start. Like I never really liked long hair Natsu. I never thought it fit his character, but I think Shiki it was cool because I liked how it worked with the anti-gravity aspect. Is either he can have it so his long hair doesn't move at all, so it's like a sign obviously that he is not being affected by gravity because of how he's manipulates it. And then in the way that he does it, obviously, because he's does it not from just straight gravity manipulation. He makes it so he's falling in different directions. Essentially, changes his point in gravity. Isolate. So essentially, this is a TLDR. Is I got a knock on the door, and it was like some guy who's just doing work in the neighborhood. But while doing so, it no, hang on, I dropped my phone. It got my dog worked up, which got my cat worked up, and my cat accidentally turned off my computer because I have the power strip in a bad spot, and on occasions one of them will step on the button and turn it off. So it took me a minute to get everything turned back on. But I was saying, crap, what was I saying? Yeah, I always liked long-haired Shiki. I always thought that it worked because then you can have otherwise Shiki could just have his hair down and it just looks cool as he's floating upside down with his long hair down, or he has it kind of normal set. It's not moving at all because he's manipulating gravity how he does. I always liked that, so I like that it's now with a form. That's why one of the things I'm super stoked about personally. The thing about it that my only personal question is what color are his ether lines in this form. Let me go look at that really quick before I read the fairy tale chapter. Let me look at this real fast because in the multicolors of ether gears, I wasn't expecting Shiki to have so many. The initial one, because the initial one is green, and then we have a purple overdrive, and then a green overdrive, and then a red overdrive. I don't really like the red overdrive. I like green on Shiki and purple. I think that it's cool that it's like his normal ones are green and then they turn purple. But I don't know. I didn't think red was like a good fit. And it's like you have to do ones that I don't want them to kind of get close to being near the others. It's one of the reasons I don't like in the anime that Natsu's Dragon Force beyond or the Arasion Seis arc is gold, because that's not Natsu's thing. Light and like shining light is like Haru's thing. Natsu is like the will of life and burning energy around it and stuff like that. It messes with the concepts around and themes around each of the characters, which I'm not a fan of. So it's like I don't want like Shiki's colors and stuff to kind of like go into like where Natsu's are, and I don't want Natsu's to go into where Haru's are. Like black is one that I think is a color that can work in either of them, because black is it's more of a shade. But it's like Haru's is like light with weapons and stuff, but then it's like black and silver primarily as like his color scheme, with like that cool leather tan as like a lower end like layer. So I just don't want that to get messed with. So it's like I wonder what Shiki's ether lines in this color or in this form are, because I assume this has to be like, if this is not Shiki's end of series form that he's gonna be using, there's one more. This has to be like, if I had to guess, second to last form. So I don't know what would be more advanced. Maybe like one where instead it's like way more compact and it's way more personal, or something, or it's like maybe it's something even more grand, or like Shiki has like instead of it being like a suit of armor, it's more like the mech suit and Shiki is inside it, and it's like there's some cool gravity being where it looks more like it's made of energy, something badass like that. But I'm very curious of what the ether line colors are. I'm hoping we can get an answer on that soon, because I like I said, I personally don't like the red, and I'm guessing it's going to be a different color. So I'm hoping because Shiki seems to pick in this one, maybe like it has to do with they're where they were emotionally and kind of like where they're at, like the color represents something. I always felt like because Shiki 4 seasons, like his name meaning 4 seasons, that he would have 4 colors, and this would be his final color. So you just kind of advance from here. I didn't think Natsu's full E and D form looked like. It's kind of weird to say because like there's the only like indicators we have towards his Etheria side are like the claws and the shadowing around the eyes. So we don't really have a set theme. I think that like his Etheria side is more just kind of like would be more of what you'd expect from a fire demon. It's more of how it's going to mix with his dragon side that's more important. Because I think that is the kind of goal. Because the idea is, and I have to do a video on it eventually, and the whole concept of a dragon slayer is you're turning a human into a dragon. The idea of not just a demon or another species turning into a dragon, but the greatest creation of a magic genius that's like designed to kill gods and end immortals turning into a dragon is a like crazy calamity idea that like probably most people in the magic world would be like, let's not do that, because that sounds like it would be extremely dangerous for everybody. It's like the idea of probably like just in concept of back when they were trying to like get ideas for like the Hadron Super Collider and like ideas like that, where it's like, yeah, this could make a black hole, and it's like there are the people that are like way more at knowledge and like way more kind of like set to it, and then there's the people that are like, okay, hold up, that sounds cool, but the potential loss of like how that could go bad is really bad for us. When is Volume 14 cover coming out? I'd have to look at when the last one came out. I think the last one came out like what? Because that one has Doger Mag and Suzaku on it, right? Because that one came out I think like what, like 2-3 months ago or something like that. We should be getting one soon because it's like every like between like 4 to 6 months generally we have them for 100 Years Quest. All right, I'm gonna open the chapter real quick. Obviously, I don't read the comments post chapter. Let me post up really fast because I haven't done anything for like posting that I've started on Twitter. I actually don't even have Google up right now. Hang on, give me a second. Just ask any more questions. I'll get to more questions before I get to the chapter itself. We're already behind, so it's like, you know, what's 15 or 16 minutes behind when we're already 13 minutes behind? Who cares? Any general questions you guys want to ask? But my hopes for the chapter, I'm hoping that like we get a setup for a fight with like something that is of equal value to our enemy. And by what I mean by that, say if we're going to be fighting this camera guy, that can be a fight for Yukino. I don't want it to be a like, oh yeah, Minerva shows up and just bodies this guy. That's the chapter. Jalal and Urza are saved. I'm hoping that the fact that like some of the characters are out of commission right now, that we don't see them for a bit. Because I would really like Sabretooth to get a good amount of time to really do things. And it's hard to really gauge where we're going to be at enemy-wise, because I was hoping that Iwashita would be able to push Natsu into Lightning Flame Dragon mode, and then it'd be like Lightning Flame Dragon mode bodies him right there. Like, I was expecting what Natsu did to him to be pretty much what Natsu does in Lightning Flame Dragon mode. So it's just like, once he gets right up to that first next step in his scale of strength, he just bodies this guy and that's it. So it's like, okay, we know where the guys start out, because it's like, oh well, base Natsu shouldn't be a problem for Sting and Rogue, and probably Minerva. I think Minerva would be able to, especially Minerva plus a year, I think would be relatively fine, depending, because it's like it also depends, because base Natsu level doesn't mean every wizard is going to have the exact same stats. It's somebody at that level in their own capability, and I think that's something that goes over a lot of people's heads when it comes to looking at people's abilities and fighting capabilities in Fairy Tail. You could have two characters be the exact same level, but one, like somebody like equal to Natsu, but they're a summoner who has horrible durability, and only if you know they somebody like maybe like say Nineheart, a good example. Natsu, just by the way that their abilities mesh, he's able just to completely steamroll him. Versus somebody who has like just an ability, like if you had somebody, say you had somebody exact same level as Natsu, but he didn't have any like crazy damage abilities, but one of his abilities is like, oh, I can implement something that makes you, like messes with your balance and your senses, and it's like, oh, bam, right into a Dragon Slayer's weakness. Natsu gets hard countered, and this guy just has something that completely screws with him. It's like just one of those things that I think a lot of people forget about. You have to keep in mind the type of magic they used, because the type of magic is going to be very dependent on like pretty much like I wish there was like Mishima had a way that we could go into pretty much stat allocation, because again it's like you could have two characters be at the same level, but a character that's a Dragon Slayer at that level is going to have way crazier durability, whereas like a character who's a summoner might just have way higher levels of magic quantity and have more tricks up their sleeve, but obviously way less durable because they're not designed to take damage like a Dragon Slayer is. But if it's Sting and Rogue set up a fight, I'm hoping that we get a cool new character design, and maybe it's somebody from Gold Owl. Like maybe we get somebody, it's like, oh, well, they sent one of their people, and maybe that's one of the ways that we're going to see more of Gold Owl as a guild, is each town we go to, amongst like a couple decent characters from like the general location they're in, there's like one or two members of Gold Owl that are in there. Those are the actual boss characters of the location. Those will be like who Sting and Rogue fight and who Natsu fights. And then you have like, oh, well, this character is like, you know, the strongest in this general area. That's who Minerva fights. And then you have a bit where Yukino fights a character who's just, you know, somebody fairly relevant. Maybe fights the camera guy. And has like a just kind of like bout where she shows her capabilities, and that's like what. So I think that the idea is like Yukino fighting somebody at like a fairly decent level, I think is pretty solid. That's where I was hoping there was going to be more of for the Spriggan minions during Alvarez. Unfortunately, Mishima didn't do too much with the Spriggan minions. I was hoping they were going to be where lower level characters were going to be fighting, maybe in their groups. No, unfortunately, like some of the side characters got to be in other fights, but obviously they didn't have like it's the same thing with actually funny with enough with the Dark Disciples. Dark Disciples get a little bit more than the Spriggan minions, but neither of them hit like the goal that I was hoping for. Either way though, let me just post up the stream, and then we will get to the chapter itself. We've pretty much just been rambling right now and kind of just going off about nothing. But let me get to my channel. I'll get a link, post it up on Twitter, and then we'll kind of just get into the actual chapter and figure out what we're going to be talking about this week. Like, I really just don't want it to be kind of like another normal setup chapter. Like, we're just going to be kind of just getting a couple fights and things just kind of laid out. And like if it's something like we get a couple matches put up, it's like I said, I would like something like, oh yeah, some Gold Owl members show up and they're going to be contending with Fairy Tail members and Sabretooth members. So we have a couple characters that we know aren't going to be foddered like Iwashita. Because Iwashita, I wasn't hoping for him to shock and awe and then just like, you know, be throwing hands with Fire Dragon King mode Natsu. No. I was hoping for him just to kind of like get a decent fight and set an idea of where we were going to be starting at. So if we can get some decent people just to kind of like, again, first town, where can we start out and just start seeing characters at? That's pretty much where I'm rooting for. So it's like maybe these characters, once we get to the fight like this, where it's like I said, if we start out with, oh yeah, we kind of just get some fights set up, we get some important characters at the end, and then that style becomes a rising setup again, rising fight setup, where it's like, oh, you had a couple matches, bam, two important ones at the end. Now it's not just a general setup chapter. Now you know that like some of like the important plots starting to move in. Because I think it would be cool if we would get some good alchemists here, because I really like the alchemy plot, but we don't really have anything for it at the moment, like in terms of the story, like any alchemy like anything in like alchemy being involved outside of the bad guy's plot. Is there any way that any characters are going to be involved in it? I really liked that we would have Gray or Gajeel get something, but we don't have anything at the moment that directly indicates that, and I'm hoping that we could get that soon. So right now we just gotta kind of sit and give it a minute, but maybe we'll get something like that in this chapter. I have some theories around Gray that I will be putting out a video around soon. I've tried to get some stuff set up so I can try and get my content back up. I've had like a lull over the last like month or so because I've been trying to get my ideas and kind of like the general setup in line, and also the best time of when doing videos and stuff fits into my daily schedule. So luckily I think I've got a good plan set ahead of me. It's just I have to now get to actually getting to these, and luckily the first thing I wanted to do was get to this chapter. So let's see if this chapter wants to be a hype chapter or if it wants to be kind of just, you know, more kind of chill setup. I will be a little mad if it's just a chill chapter because I want something to talk about. The last 2 weeks, the only thing that was pretty hype was like, sweet, now we have a reason for Sabretooth to actually get involved, to actually have a reason for doing things. It's not just going to be that they're along for the ride. They actually have a time now where pretty much everybody but Natsu is taken out of the picture for use, and they have to be aided right now. And that was one thing I thought was actually pretty cool, was Natsu was the one to not get caught out and trapped, because usually he is. Usually he's one of the people to immediately get taken out because obviously he's the most like direct dangerous fighter, just because how like he'll charge in. He's got really good senses. He's able to match opponents and figure them out really fast. And there's only certain times he can really get directly just straight caught out. Let me post up. Like you have to get like certain surprise things, or like Natsu has to be not in an angry or combative mindset for him to be caught out. So let me see really fast. I'll just put Sabretooth hours are let me actually, those Sabretooth stocks are being inspected this week. And I'll just put that freaking hashtags, and then I'll post it up and we'll get to the chapter. Obviously we're late, but we were late going into it, so it's not a big deal. Okay, let me get to the chapter, and then let me see any of the comments real quick beforehand. Oh, it's just Zura just being a simp towards Minerva. Well, the thing is, like, they should be, because when we were in, so every single member of Diablos was for sure on base Natsu level, like, no doubt. After seeing how base Natsu did against Mad Mole, there's no doubt that all of them are base Natsu level. I don't count like the background characters when they were having the feast, because I still am not 100% sure those were characters and not just like statues or displays or something. But either way, I feel like the easiest thing is people, but it's like none of them even got a chance to talk, so it's like it just feels a little weird. The members of the Moonlit divinities, the God Seeds, like these guys are all base Natsu level and up. So, and I don't think that it's impossible for it, because it's like you just have I'm the strongest guy in this location, strongest guy in this general area, being base Natsu level is 100% fine. It's like those are the people, it's like, okay, yeah, I think Natsu should be able to fight those people, because those, when you think about it, are probably in the top 100 or so on the planet. And Natsu isn't number 1 in the world, but he's climbing up to like those high and notable ranks. And as far as we know, those top people of the world are the dragon gods. Natsu isn't in full range of them, but we know he is stronger than the human form of a dragon god, the general one. We're not talking about like buff Dogremag or anything, or like full power Alderon's god seed. I'm talking about like the general human forms. So it's like I think that if you have like another character who it's like, oh, this is one of like a Spriggan 12 equivalent of this continent, I think that's perfectly fine for them to be within fighting range of Natsu. like normal fighting range. Whereas like I think a character who's just like, oh, I'm a notable character, I'm one of the strongest in the general area, as well as I have a power system that isn't the same as yours. I think that that's fine for them to be scrapping with base Natsu. I don't think that's an issue with anybody. Talk about God Seeds of all return. Oh, there's always that possibility, but I'm gonna assume no. But let me get to the chapter itself. We got Natsu like in a coal miner's like design, but he's just got like a really big pickaxe. I figured Mishima would give him like a dragon pickaxe. I guess it was Ueda who probably drew this one specifically. I know Mishima does like the line art, and then they do like the finish. But like I wonder like how much like he does for like the cover stuff, because the cover stuff I don't imagine he has to do that. I would assume he would do the story, and then it's like, you know, the cover art, they can do what they want. But also wouldn't surprise me if he was doing the cover art too, just because like the cover art to me is like probably like Mishima just doing like a little doodle before he gets into the chapter. Oh no, oh no. So man, Mishima is doing me dirty on this. So the reason that so I'll give a little backstory. I've always liked that big, super meaty beef head look. That was one of the initial reasons that I read One Piece, is because I like those designs. I think that they are, like, when you have, like, the cool, super sleek, kind of, like, Mystique kind of character, like Mistogun, or you have some, like, speed-based character who's just, like, light and nimble and supposed to be, like, real kind of, maybe, like, small, someone like Luck. It's like, cool. I like the design of like those big meatheads, and unfortunately, it's also one of the reasons I really like Toriko. Mishima has never been very kind to them consistently, and it's like another example is like D6, and it's just like Mishima just wants to get these guys trashed all the time, and it's like he not only couldn't even let Iwashita be base Natsu level, but Natsu, Sting, and Rogue, and I assume everybody else, but we see the 3 dragon slaying members of the group. They've gone to Gagarok, and they've beat up Iwashita again. So I assume that they stormed his guild. I don't know if it doesn't look like they like beat up other people in the guild. I'm guessing they went right straight to him, and then Minerva's joining in as well, and they're just trying to get information out of him. I'm guessing they're skipping straight over, straight over like dealing with more people directly of this town. Obviously, they have to get the other members of a fairy tale that are not within like their group right now. They're captured in some sort of way. But the question is going to be, how exactly are they going to how are they going to move from here to there? So this is actually kind of funny. So Sabretooth, like Minerva, Sting, and Rogue are wrecking the guild and like beating up on these guys, and Natsu's just kind of watching, and he's just like, why are you guys doing this? And it's just like, it's really weird, because it's like Natsu is like at a spot where he's matured in certain ways. Like he's matured in ways, and I think a lot of people who don't pay attention to him as a character don't notice this, because he retains a lot of ways that keeps him who he is, but he matures in like reactionary ways and ways he processes and thinks in things around him. And so it's like, I want to know the context of why he decides not to fight fully, because I feel like he just is like, well, I probably didn't. We already got the information out of him. Why do I want to beat him up continuously? And because I feel like my guess is Minerva wants just to kind of get more out of him or something, and just feels like he's got more information, but Natsu's already good. And they just kind of go overboard. But like, that's something earlier Natsu would do, but like current Natsu, he's just like, oh, we got it, and we're good. But because of the way he is, I feel like he just wouldn't acknowledge that he used to be like this, and he's just like, man, what are you guys doing? Like, who would do that? It's like, come on, man, what's going on here? But at the end of it, he's just like, listen, there's like a joke in here, and he's just like, listen, I need you guys to do me a quick favor. And he wants the members of Sabretooth to act like other people in the guild, like, or other people rather in his group. Like, he wants Yukino just to, pretty much everybody just to cosplay. He has Happy be played by Sting, Carla is Frosh, Lecter is Wendy, Yukino's Lucy, Gray is played by Rogue, who Rogue is just in his underwear, and then Minerva's in some armor to be Urza. Obviously this is like a one-page joke. I was so worried this was gonna go on for a second, but no, it's just a short joke. they're like making other jokes though about like Lucy being tortured, and it's like once they're doing it, it's like not like tortured, it's like feather tortured and like tickle tortured. It's just like, you know, they're memeing, and it gets Natsu actually kind of upset, and he just decides, okay, no, we're moving now, we're going in. I'm I'm not too sure what's gonna go on with the picture guy, but for the old lady, I don't think she knocked out Lucy for nefarious reasons. My belief is she knocked out Lucy to take her somewhere private to where there was no opposition, there was nothing that anyone like in the setup would question, because maybe somebody else in the town would be like, oh, they're just capturing a member of Fairy Tail, because I assume like there's a spread of knowledge. It's not just Iwashita, like maybe like any knowledgeable alchemist in the town would have certain degrees of information, but it's like, oh, well, maybe she's like trying to help Lucy and take her somewhere to give her some context as to Athena and what's going on, and she's actually maybe like an ally or a neutral party. Whereas the camera guy, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure what's going to go on with him. I don't have any stock in him. The only way I feel like his character could go anywhere is if he's one of those dudes who is actually like a character who's really powerful or cool in disguise. And it's like he's disguised through magic or alchemy, or he takes off his freaking turban, and it's one of those characters who he takes off one thing and he looks completely different, and suddenly he's a really cool looking design. But otherwise, I feel like he's just gonna get foddered. Like this guy just looks like he just has a design of like a silly short moment character to me. But like he has like some like moments where he seems a little bit spooky, but not really. But maybe that's the thing, is Mishima's trying to foreshadow ominous nature from him, and he's actually somebody more dangerous. But that's just kind of like a unknown right now. But Lucy's pretty much just okay, as we actually find out with her. She's just in a like general jail cell, locked up. This lady is just kind of like eating snacks, not really doing anything. And then Rogue like sneaks into. Oh, Rogue is actually at Gold Owl's base. How is he already there? So they must have just rushed to the city. They must have just asked, "Where's the city at? We're going there," and they're kind of gonna go about the plan from there, just taking it directly. But I'm guessing that there's going to be a separation right now of the groups. Like maybe Jalal and Urza is going to be stuck in over in that city. Was it Phelan? I think it was called. We're gonna have Wendy, Gray, and Carla actually go to Gold Owl, but it's gonna be Lucy who is unknown and trapped, and it's like this lady maybe has like an alternative motive, or she's got like something to tell Lucy, or something around those means. Who knows? Maybe she's like a goof. Actually, something that I would do. This would be my plan. This would be my favorite thing. Is imagine because Mishima likes the Souls games and stuff and Elden Ring. Imagine this. Imagine you have like she is like a merchant, like but she has Aquarius's key, and she sees that Lucy is a celestial spirit wizard. She's like, I need to guarantee this sale. And she's just one of those NPCs you talk to. It's like she instantly just teleports you. You pretty much get knocked out from smoke. You line up in another place. And it's like, it's inconvenient, but it's beneficial at the same time. I don't know. It's something funny like that. Either way, this lady, I'm expecting something. I'm expecting her to be like the wild card out of the group. Something kind of like really weird like that. But yeah, as expected, it looks like Gray, Wendy, and Carla are back to. So they're just back to their normal bodies. They're not in as gems anymore. It looks like that's over, and they're being questioned by. It looks like Sai, and I don't see any other important members in the around them, and I think that's actually kind of important at the moment, because it doesn't look like there are any notable looking people there. So if Sai is the strongest person in that location, because I assume Gray, Wendy, and Carla are unable to use magic right now, I feel like I think it makes 100% sense if alchemists, because they're at the end of the day scientists. They are essentially it's magic science to a degree, but it is science in its own way, regardless of what it is, just because of the way alchemy and concept is. So these guys should have a, I would assume, are intelligent with materials and communication and information more so probably than an average wizard. So if they know, oh yeah, to take out a wizard, you need to have, these anti-magic cuffs. Especially because alchemists and like these guys who create tools and stuff, I feel like it makes sense if they would have the knowledge and capabilities and preparation to shackle a wizard if they need to. With Carla, it just looks like rope. We don't really see anything, but I feel like it makes complete sense for that. But like I was saying, I don't think, at least as of right now, this isn't something that Rogue couldn't just go down there and immediately beat the shit out of everybody. Like, he couldn't just go down there and fodder all of them, get the shackles off of Carla, Gray, and Wendy, and get them out of there. Because I don't think that this should be an issue for him. And for Carla, one thing about Carla, that like, unless these ropes, one thing about these ropes, if these don't have something that cancels her magic or restricts her, I'm going to be so disappointed in her. Because she has transformation magic. I know that like the idea if she turned into her humanoid form, it would probably hurt because those, like if those didn't rip, it would be really constricting. But she can't turn into something smaller and then just slip out of her cuffs and then get the ropes and then shift back or something, or maybe that's her plan. It would be super cool if like they get put in a room and she does that. She turns into like a freaking butterfly or something and then turns back in herself and is then able to use like her claw to undo the magic cuffs. And she's like, oh, I planned for this because this has happened to people in the guild before, and I wanted to be ready for this. Because I feel like Carla could easily be a character who could do that. Panther Lily, Panther Lily doesn't have transformation magic. So it's like if Panther Lily had he has his large and small form, but Carla actually has transformation magic. She's turned into a humanoid form. She should it's a larger form than her normal form. So she should have the ability to turn into something smaller. So I'll be really disappointed if she doesn't, if given the opportunity, she doesn't do something like that. Man's out here imagining Lucy in a reverse bunny girl suit and then getting ripped up. He's mad at the idea of other people doing this stuff to Lucy. Because in Natsu's mind, he likes to mess with Lucy. He does not like other people to mess with Lucy. He does not like anybody else doing any form of what he would see as like close and playful to her, or potentially embarrassing if it's from somebody that is, I would assume, in a way also more malicious. Because like think of it partially in a way, somebody doing something like tickling the shit out of them, a friend doing that, or in Natsu's, not talking about like the obvious like romantic interest that Natsu and Lucy clearly have for each other, but they just both don't acknowledge it. Just the idea of like a close friend messing with another person, messing with each other, doing that, it's not weird. But if it's like you're captured by an enemy and like their plan is to tickle you, you'd be like, okay, these guys are weird. We need to go get her out of there. I think there's multiple degrees of his thought in there, but obviously, I think that the one most to him is that he doesn't like it when other people do stuff to Lucy, but he likes doing it to Lucy. If there are alchemists, shouldn't they focus on making potions and poisons? I think that's going to depend. I think it's going to be a widespread of alchemy. Because it seems like, similar to magic, there are types of alchemists. Because Iwashita, even though we only saw a little bit of him and Natsu foddered him, he was clearly to the alchemists what like somebody like Natsu or Urza is to wizards. They are combat wizards, where these are like combat alchemists. Whereas, again, similar, another one is you have fighters for curse users or spiritual art users, but you also have casters and more of traditional long-range fighters for those versions. So with alchemy, it's going to depend. I think we'll have people that do potions. I think we'll have people that do kind of more Full Metal Alchemist style, where they're just converting things into other things or changing the shape of things. and I think there's going to be people that are like combative, like directly fighting you using alchemy. Dukes is I really want to see what the plan is for some of the upper people. There has to be at least one, I would assume, melee fighter. Like Duke is, I'm very curious of how he's going to be moveset wise. If he is going to be spread out, like it's like the way that it's spread out move wise. I'm thinking the idea of he's kind of like an alchemist Jalal, where he has range, he's got melee combat, he's got utility, he's got ways of augmenting his own like speed or strength. Maybe he's got healing, and because of alchemy, things like potions, things he can prep wise bring into a fight. That's what, like, to me is like the very interesting thing about what Mishima, like what exactly is Mishima gonna do with Duke? What is the plan with Duke's backstory? Because Duke is very interesting and similar to Ziggy, but not as like much as like what I thought Ziggy was gonna be, but more of like Ziggy kind of became. Is I thought Ziggy, I won't go too much into spoilers in case anybody has read Eden Zero, but like I thought Ziggy was going to be way more into the large scale lore instead of events of like kind of ties to more grounded to Shiki and less of like again the large scale. Like I thought it was going to be like, oh, he was back in the Dark Ages and stuff like that. That wasn't the case. Something like that for Duke, because we don't know if Duke is going to be just a very powerful alchemist of a guild, like the top alchemist guild on the continent, or if he's going to be a character potentially maybe like Irene, August, Eclair, somebody who's hundreds and hundreds of years older than you would think, or maybe there's somebody that's even more important, somebody like Irene, somebody like Zareth, somebody like apparently Athena's not as old, but like, you know what I mean, and somebody who sits in that larger scale kind of grand importance category, because like his I would imagine his backstory would tie into way larger scale world events and like things that happen maybe over on this continent, and maybe the dragon gods, or like maybe like he like I say I'm starting to remember my words really bad today. I'm saying like the idea of like, oh, what if during the rise of Viernes like 250 300 years ago, Duke had something like maybe Acnologia fought Viernes before Viernes reached that point where he became a concept. Maybe this is where it happened. Like imagine this. There's like I'll lay a hypothetical scenario. Viernes is close to the level he needs to be in like reaching this like crazy power level of like god status that he became. Acnologia finds him. They start fighting. Viernes is getting stronger mid fight. Acnologia at one point like cleaves off maybe like a chunk of flesh, just like maybe like a not like a full limb, maybe like a finger, or you know, like a chunk of his shoulder, or just like a piece. Like just imagine a piece. And then during the fight, like shortly after, Viernes just reaches that strength level, and suddenly he just disappears like freaking Obi-Wan Kenobi. And because he reached this level of power as a gold dragon, that he ascends. He exists now as a concept. And it's like, not the idea that Acnologia couldn't figure out a way to go after him. It's like he just doesn't know what happened. And it's just like, okay. And he just leaves. Kind of just one of those things that just similar to Sirius Island, where it's just like, he would have no knowledge of what just occurred, and he would just assume it's gone. Nothing I can do about it. Done, and then just leaves. Because to him, it might just be like, oh yeah, this was a fairly strong dragon. I don't know what happened. If I fight him again, he's dead. But for now, he's just gone. I think that could very logically happen. And then it's like imagine you have Duke, who then, in contrast to, say, whatever Georg's origin story, instead of eating it, he does alchemy and research with it, and he essentially achieves, like, the Philosopher's Stone. He becomes immortal, and he just ends up making all these breakthroughs using this, like, one step away from a god level of a dragon, because think of it like that as well. I think that would make a lot of sense of why he'd be so powerful, but it's like he's not at that level he needs to be, because where he's drawing power from is just steps away from an ascension point, and that ascension point he just can't figure out how to fill the gap. And I think that would be really cool, because that could be like a kind of also callback to Hades, because a lot of people have been making obviously the similar. They don't look similar. It's just kind of the eye patch, and I guess they have long hair and a beard-ish, but like their hair and beard style is completely different. Their designs are different, other than their old dudes, but yeah, old dudes with eye patch. But it's like you could have the idea of like similar to like when Hades was giving his speech to the abyss of magic and depths of magic, is he was close to it, but that like last bit he couldn't fill in the rest to reach it. He couldn't get that last step, because the last step was Zareth, and he was saying that last step was so vital, but it was within his grasp. It's just something that it's like, because he's like, I have Athena, I have the money, I have the guild, I have the personnel, I have the knowledge. The only thing I need left is stuff from these dragon gods, and then that's it, and then I'm done. And it's just that last step, that just moments before victory thing, that I think that like he could have. Like Duke is a very interesting character, just on like the potential of him. It's just going to depend on what Mishima wants to do with him. Granted, Georg had a lot of potential, but Georg was never set up to where Duke is now. We are in an arc with Gold Owl to where, logically, at least as of right now, Duke is the end of arc boss. We don't know if that's going to be the case. It may be the Signario sisters will be the end boss, and then Duke will be the boss in the next arc. I think a really cool scenario would be the Signario sisters are the arc boss, and then it's like we see Duke fight, but it's like we don't see the full extent of Duke fight. Like, imagine we see like everything Duke has now, but Duke survives the arc, goes into the next arc. We see him again, but he achieves a greater power through Viernes, and then, well, I guess it'd be more like Athena is more of the final villain this arc or something. And then Duke next, and imagine it's like you get the fight with Duke this arc, but then Duke survives next arc, he gets a higher power at the Viernes, and he's like the right-hand character instead. So he becomes like Viernes's, his mid-boss. You have to eventually, like, he's the guy you fight right before going to him, or he's just the biggest general of his capabilities before you end up fighting the primary boss kind of setup. You know what I mean? That's essentially how I could see a really hype way to go about Duke's character. Is I would assume either Duke or Athena are going to survive through this arc and go into the next arc. Mishima has always had a bias for women who stand out, but he also has that a bias for like powerful old man characters, because the two, you gotta keep, this is one of the things I always tell people when it comes to assessing points in a story before they happen with an author, is you do have to know a degree of the author. And for Mishima, if you read his other works, consistently the old powerful dude trait exists. These women who stand out, these old, usually like they're older in the group. They don't have to be old women, but it's usually the older women of the group that are kind of like the more seniors. People like, again, Ursa, Minerva, Selene, Irene. They end up being really powerful because in Mishima's life growing up, the three most like directly influential people in his life were his older sister, his mother, and his grandfather. So it's like you have older sister figure, mother figure, grandfather figure. Who are these who are characters like Duke? Oh man, an old man character, similar to someone like August, similar to Makarov, similar to Hades. Like you got like dangerous people just on that trope. Like the only person that's really is Jienma, but like Jienma wasn't weak. Jienma just got used as a measuring stick in two scenarios. It was just the second scenario was slightly nicer than the first scenario. Also a lot of potential Orga. Orga did, but it's like Mishima, like I said, you got to know the author. Mishima does not treat the Godslayers very well. I don't know why. It's crazy how Hades is older than August. Hades weaker. Well, yeah, but like look at the context. You have Hades, who is like, yes, a human with potential, and obviously knowledge, but you have August, who is the son of two absurdly powerful people, and like they even said, like he remembers everything since birth because his magic was so high that it just his magic was so high that his brain and his memory of all things is just intact. It's one of those things where it's just a crazy character feat that exists for no reason other than to hype them up. Why doesn't Urza cut the space? Well, this is like an alchemy thing. We don't know if this is a magic thing. But on top of that, like it seems it's only been like well, no, because it's like if they had enough time to go to another town, it's been a minute. But it seems like there's like a little bit of a blip of time. Let me go back and look after the characters getting in there, because it looks like, at least from like the chapter is set up, it's like you have the main cast, Natsu and Sabretooth end up moving. At the same time, you have what's going on with the picture dude, Jalal, and Urza. And then you have the stuff with Lucy and the old lady, because I think these things happen at the point where the characters are like, okay, we're going now to where Gold Owl is at. And let me see if I'll have to check actually, because I can't. They made it so you can't screenshot off the app anymore, so I have to wait till people post stuff online. If there's a name for the city Gold Owl is in, I want to know its name. I like their cool. I gotta look at what those building tops are called, because I like them. But it's like more of that Middle Eastern style. I believe it is. I don't know exactly where in the Middle East, but but it looks cool. But it looks like to me, like I said, you have the events of them setting out happen at the time of seeing Jalal, Urza, and then Lucy and Happy, because I think we're not supposed to see the following events, because one, I think that Lucy's going to talk to this old lady, and then whatever events are going to happen with Jalal and Urza, maybe they get out and then that they show up late, because that's my guess. But I think that with the whole like not being able to, or like not going using her Nakagami armor, I think partly is because it's not magic, it's alchemy. I don't know. Because like Urza, the way Urza cuts space though is like through like a type of like she's cutting the magic and doing it. I don't think she can do it just from the same thing on like alchemy. Because like this is like a different like type of abilities that we don't really know exactly the foundation of how entirely they work. But also like if say it hasn't been very long in terms of when we see them in this chapter, it might just be they haven't done it yet. Because if say it's only been like in the span of getting captured, going like they go back to the inn they were at, then they go to Gagarok, and then they set out from there. That can honestly all happen within a few hours, and I think it would make sense for Jalal and Urza, because of the way that both of their characters are, that they're not in a dangerous scenario. This guy's not trying to hurt them. They aren't restricted by like their magic isn't restricted, so they know. Like, think about this. Let me lay out a picture real quick for you. I didn't mean to make a joke in reference to pictures, but let me just kind of lay out the idea really fast. You were trapped in a spot. You're not in danger. The guy isn't doing anything to put you in danger. You've checked to see you can use magic, so you know that I can bust out when I want to. Let's see if we can overhear any information from this guy, or we can figure out what's going on. Maybe. I think there's a couple kind of things in it that we just haven't seen yet. That it's one of those questions where it's like it could be a power thing, it could be it just hasn't been enough time that like maybe they haven't thought about it. There's like I think there's also a decent chance that like Urza and Jalal are just kind of more like getting tripped over each other each time because they're being embarrassed. Like, you know, something happens and they just have like a moment of being embarrassed or something. Because it is very true that Urza and Jalal have a counterproductive aspect to each other, because both of them take each other out of the mindset that make them so capable. Urza stops being as like level-headed and stoic and problem-solving as she is, and Jalal ends up just kind of like being less analytical and trying to like figure out what he can use in his scenario, figure out what he has to do now to get out of what he's in. I think it's just because of like in a couple factors that are set up because I think the way that it was with the way that we saw those two groups and then some form of short time skip, maybe a few days, them going to the city Gold Owls in. So it's like we don't know again what happens in between points A and B of time, to where next time we see those two groups, there'll be some form of development between them. Is my guess, and that's why we get right to Gray, Wendy, and Carla being in an active plot point is because we want to be like, okay, focus on this. This is what's happening. Don't think about what those guys are doing. We're just going to give you a quick kind of like glimpse at where we're leaving them off at the moment. Neither of them are in danger, but they're kind of just like in, they're not limbo, but they're kind of just on standby at the moment kind of thing. I don't think Athena will wrap up in this arc. I think we'll build the White Wizard at the beginning of 100 Years Quest and hype her up as dangerous like Seraph. Well, the thing is, like, I think that she could work as like a villain this arc, just in this arc, if done right. If done right, obviously is something that can fit in a lot of ways. Dogremag, I think, was done fine, but he was more of a surprise villain. Athena's a setup villain. If Mishima wants to do it in one arc, it has to be done right. I think either her or Duke has to be the main villain this arc, and the other one will make it out. If we can get one of them going to the next arc, I'll be hyped. I just hope we don't lose both of them. Athena is really cool, but I think Duke is really cool too. I think both of them hold a lot of power and potential. Because, like, what if again gets down to it and then Duke betrays Athena and then takes her power and stuff for himself? And it's more of, like, building onto his character. And you have something between the two of them. You, like, maybe Mishima goes kind of like... I think Mishima obviously went with Pino as, like, a Pinocchio thing. What if he's trying to do, like, a reverse thing where it's, like, instead of Shiki and Pino having this, loving relationship between like this dude and his little robot buddy, is you have this dude who instead it's like a little robot buddy, you have this robot weapon and he betrays her even though it was like about turning into a real person and like a ultimate weapon against the dragon gods, as he's just like he ends up just backstabbing her and taking everything for himself. I think that would also be really cool too if he's a Hades-esque and like villain. But he does that because we know Hades actually did care for Ultir. And it's like if you had a similar thing where maybe this was like his Ultir, but ends up again betraying her in the long run, I think that would be really cool. What purpose is Jalal in this arc for? We haven't got to it yet. We literally just started. And the first thing that happened is Mishima took out a lot of the big, like the main cast people, and to let Sabretooth do some stuff for a bit. So we have to wait a bit. Like it's not like everything is going to happen at the same time. Think about like once we really got into the Dogra Labyrinth, we really didn't have anything for Natsu until his skirmish. We had a skirmish with Suzaku, but really it was just their fight with Dogremag. So it's like you really didn't get a fight with him until like way later in. Laxus mostly just got beat up until his fight with Kirin, where they actually had like a fight. Not everybody has to do anything instantly. And this is an arc too where it seems like Mishima wants to set up some stuff, let some things build, and probably do events larger. Like do something more towards like Drasil and less so like Elantir or the Dogra Labyrinth. Do something way more kind of like where it's going to stretch on because it's built to be a larger story. Like maybe we'll get a longer arc and more events because this one's going to be something that has just more of a wave of events. Like maybe at one point we get we get Gray and them saved, bam, more enemies, things just start getting pushed, bam, Jalal and Urza come back, starts getting pushed, Gajeel and Laxus or something happens where like one thing I would love This is a theory I want to talk about just really quick. I'll share with you guys. I'll go into more detail because I want to do a video on it. How Gajeel could be involved in this arc could actually work. Laxus is difficult unless Laxus just decides, like, because the Lacrima, he wants to do something with alchemy or some weird thing where it's something with, like, implants of... I don't know. It's really weird of, like, where he would go. I feel like it's easier to and better to take Laxus off for a little bit, maybe bring him back later because he just had a hype moment in the last arc. And his powers are in a weird spot, so it's like we can let that brood in the background for a bit. Bring Gajeel in. This is how I think it would make sense for Gajeel to be in the arc. Gajeel, because of Gold Owl and stuff, maybe he's suspicious. Why did these guys want that? He ends up using his connections at the Magic Council to look into cases involving stuff over on Giltina and in these areas of these alchemists, because I think it would make sense if they didn't send jobs that messed with other continents and other governments and stuff in different lands to guilds, but they would do it to their own people in undercover missions. So Gajeel would be like, oh, well, because I have ways of getting this knowledge, they trust me, because Ward and stuff should still be within the council. I think Ward would trust him to give this kind of stuff to him. And it's like, oh, you know, there's certain types of corruption and whatnot Gold Owl has been up to over in this other continent. You know, it's connected to a bunch of these different other alchemy guilds. Like, maybe, because, like, one thing that is in Gajeel's spinoff is there's pretty much, like, the drug trade and slave trades. And, like, he was busting crime like that. So it's like you connect something like that to his to him to where he would go after it. And then it's just like, bam, you have Panther Lily and Gajeel in detective outfits again. And they're kind of just in Giltina doing detective work. And then bam, they're suddenly in the fray. They aren't actually... Like, Gajeel essentially looks for a way to cheat, involve himself. But, like, imagine in Gajeel's mind, like, this is something that's, like, beneficial to him. But it's like he gets, like, a crisp reward from like the Magic Council and their government for doing this job, because we know Gajeel has been going out and doing all these jobs to get money to support his family once his children are born. So it's like, in his mind, think about this. He's like, oh, I get in, I get, you know, I get involved with what's going on. I'm going to get paid a lot. Like, especially, I think that would have to be something that's very involved in, like, the concept, is he would get a lot of money out of it, because then it's like, bam, once I'm done with this, I'm pretty much set, and I'll be able to afford, you know, a good house and, you know, everything I need to, you know, for the next couple of years for my family, and then he can kind of just chill and do stuff. I think that would make sense for Gajeel just by the way that he is once his children are born, like, this would make sense too. He gets to a point where he has enough money to where he is able to kind of, you know, get a normal setup, house, maybe some land, and then have enough money to pretty much, like, cruise for, like, a few years. Imagine Gajeel for, like, 3 or 4 years. He's pretty much being a dad. He's training in his free time, but other than that, he's just doing stuff with his family. He doesn't need to work. He doesn't have any need for money because he got so much from doing this, like, big mission from the Magic Council. Like, big, like, huge thing, you know, it's worth whatever, frickin' 500 million jewels or something, and it's, like, worth, like, you know, the equivalent of $5 million or something. And he's just freaking coasting for years. He's just doing good because he did some big... So I think that would be really cool, too, because imagine it's the anime, and it's, like, from his perspective, but it's done of, like, this almost Mission Impossible style, like, tune and tone to where, like, he's like, I've got one more big mission under me. I said I was going to retire, but it just brings me back one more time. And I said this is going to be the last time. And it's one of those things where it's like Gajeel becomes that character where every time he says he's out, he's like, ah, dang it. Okay, you convinced me. He goes on the adventure again. I think that would be really, really funny. And that would be like a really good progression of Gajeel's character. because it's like he tries always to keep away, but it's like there's always that like he always wants to return, and he looks for excuses to go on adventures again, but he's like, if I can't go, I can't go. I'm kind of like, because it's clear he's gonna love his family and be a good dad, but I would really like the idea of just like he's always listening for certain adventures. Like he's not just like, oh yeah, I'll go on a quest, because Jet and Droid needing like another guy to go on a quest, and there's like something easy money I feel like he could do, but the idea of like something that's actually like a quest requiring somebody at his level that would be dangerous, he would be always waiting and be like, oh, you guys need somebody specifically with iron powers. Well, okay, let me get my bags. Do you think Natsu and Suzaku might have another team up? Yes, I would hope so. Why don't give Jalal solo story always shit for him? Why Jalal hasn't gotten his own solo story, that I don't know. That has actually always confused me, because I figured he would. Because like one thing about, so just the quick story on, for those who don't know, the reason Mishima always has that character with that specific eye tattoo is in his first published one-shot, his main character had that. Then he did Rave Master. His favorite character in Rave Master was Sieg Hart. And he wanted to bring that over and keep making that a continuous thing. And obviously having Jalal, Mystagun, Genesis, Justice, Elsie as well, I guess. But making that a continuous thing goes from something all the way back to his original main character. And because of that, it's like he's always, it's weird with Justice. He doesn't do as much with Justice, but it's like he's always favored characters that have that eye mark. So it's like you figured that like during a point where like there's lots of spin-offs that Jalal would get something. But I guess not. He instead was just kind of doing his own thing. I don't know what Mishima had otherwise planned. But it is how I guess he just decided it to be. Gajeel Miss Gajeel in the Grand Match Games. I mean, Gajeel was really cool in Tartaros, and he was cool in Alvarez. I thought Gajeel was cool in 100 Years Quest. And it's just like, Gajeel just, unfortunately, in the last arc, got put in a bad spot. But the thing is, Gajeel's had really, really good character development. So I don't know why anybody would really be against like where he's at right now. Like Gajeel is in a fantastic spot for a character. Like he's had excellent development. He's had really strong, mature moments. He's already pretty much full clear. He's already pretty much full clear of the bad anime dads freaking trope. Like, that alone. Why would you not want that alone to be a fierce win for your character? Like if you like Gajeel, just that alone is such a win, because that has to be like one of the stupidest tropes, in my opinion. Not in terms of, oh yeah, this doesn't make sense. It's just like I don't know why you would ever want as a writer to work towards that. Like why would you like for certain characters, if events in the story, it makes sense for characters to be bad dads, but it's like why would you have a character go through setup with that in mind, or like you just decide that on the fly? And it's very consistent with a lot of main characters. Like Naruto ended up being a pretty bad dad. Freaking Goku's a pretty bad dad. I'm trying to think of what other main characters off the top of my head. But they also just have bad dads in general. Like having freaking like Gon's dad, freaking having you. Well, actually no, Yusuke's dad is cool in his own ways. Never mind. Ryzen is a guy. Gajeel and Gene returns to development, but he was so cool when he was a little bad. I mean, Gajeel still acts like that. The thing is, like, we just haven't had an arc where Gajeel's had a focus like that. Because the only 2 bits is 3 bits, I guess, 2.5. We had Detective Gajeel, which, get out of here, Detective Gajeel is amazing. I love when we see Gajeel and Panther Lily get up to criminal justice. Like, that is one of the funniest yet works so well when you think about Gajeel as a character, because he's Gajeel is a product of his environment. He and Natsu is to a degree, but Gajeel is way more so. Gajeel takes way more to wherever he's at, and he just kind of like makes that into, he lets that kind of really seep into who he is. And so it's like Gajeel, and I think that the Edalus portion of the anime where we saw Edalus Gajeel, I consider that canon because I think it makes sense for Gajeel to meet himself and then be like, you know what? You're right. I do have detective skills. It makes sense why me in another world where I don't focus on fighting is like a journalist and detective. That makes sense. Like that just seems like a Gajeel thing where he looks at it, he's like, yeah, I can see it. And then so like because at that point you go into what? You go into like Dragon or Phoenix Priestess. You have him start doing detective work, start like busting crimes, and then you have after Tartaros, the stuff with Ward. He ends up working for the Magic Council, and so that becomes a permanent thing to his story. Is that he decides that he's dispensing justice in a way, and he looks at it as like he's allowed to be a little bit more aggressive and rough if he's putting down bad guys, because it's not like he goes out and just beats up anybody. He obviously goes for like bad criminals. Gajeel isn't a corrupt guy at this point. He actually is like, oh, this is a bad dude, cool, I get to beat the shit out of him. It's kind of like Jack is like that, right? From he has that same thing. I remember it's not like it's explored much, but Jack in I'm trying to English. Black Clover has that same mindset where he's allowed to cut up and strong people and fight strong opponents with no repercussions if they're on enemy lines because he's doing it for his country. No, I think the thing is like you can only really go off recency bias, but it's like Jalal has been portrayed as stronger so much, and it's like right after, and here again, right after an arc where Laxus gets a new upgrades and powers. Oh look, Jalal is now in an arc where it seems like he's probably gonna get some new upgrades and powers. I wonder, man, where this could go for Jalal, other than he's gonna get something new of some kind and get some new feats. Like you can only really go again if you just ignore logic in the series. Just want Natsu to have your point like Gray. Well, Gray's development has been more towards his relationship. Natsu's we've had stuff on the back burner, which we have had stuff for an 100 Years Quest for Natsu, but it's like it's weird. The way that I can describe it is Gray fighting wise, all his new things have been put out in front of us in multiple areas, but not progressed. We had stuff like Gray using just his devil slaying abilities against the Thunder Legion. Then we had Gray use larger scale dynamic ice make against Hakune, right? A different kind of like slight variation of how he usually uses his magic, right? Then he uses Juvia's magic and then uses his magic in style of Juvia's magic. So when you look at that, Gray has then used 3 new ways of going about his magic. He hasn't learned a new magic, but it's like, oh, I've explored more just using the demon power. I've used my magic in scale and capabilities at a new level. And then now I'm using my magics at a new kind of technique style because I'm understanding like the idea of like more water in the atmosphere and just being around, water just being around you all the time and you just don't really think about it. So it's like fight wise, each of these different things have been placed for Gray in terms of like an upgrade to his powers. Natsu has had those placed for his character. Stuff like what's going on with Ignia. What's his whole take on Ignia in depth. The whole bit about him not having control over his power when he fought Merphobia and he was going in and out of consciousness, and it clearly bothered him. And he's sitting there just kind of staring off at the city and just not sure really clearly how to respond to it. because we know when Natsu's very bothered, he goes deep into thought because he needs a moment to kind of recompose himself and to really kind of think over what's happening. It's another time he did that was after he got humbled by Gildarts and he had to kind of think about what just really went down. Like Natsu isn't he's not a super deep thinker, but when something really happens, he needs a moment really kind of just to be like, yeah, because that's happened then, it happened after. I mean, it's not like a tragedy just occurred. It's something that happened to him, something he needs to think about personally. And it's not against something like with Igneo. It's something that is he's once he comes to his senses, and once it happened, it was over. It's not like, because when you look at like what happened to Igneo, it's not like, yeah, it's done. It's like clearly the shock of it stayed way more. And then it's like you also have his PTSD with the Igneo Akalogia fight. So it's like we've had points put out there for Natsu, but nothing in terms of like a large connection of those points and then a big step forward. It's like if you imagine a bridge, each of those pieces are like steps in making the bridge, but like the steps, like, you know, putting the poles down and laying like whatever foundation, it's just like putting those actual steps that you put your feet on that you need for stability. Like they haven't gotten the full followed through finish in like completing those. And that's like the thing I think is kind of neat about Gray and Natsu right now is Mishima is doing them in contrast to each other. Gray is getting lots of good straightforward character stuff, but any fight stuff, it's being laid out. Natsu is getting lots of good new fight stuff, but his character stuff is being laid out. And he's doing it in a way that is, again, similar to how he wrote Fairy Tail. I think that's one of the things that people miss, is he will focus very much on stuff going on with one character while, like, laying out a lot of things in the background. Think about, like, the first real character arc we had. We had Galuna Island. When you think about Galuna Island, it was about Gray, but one of the things that's very important, it was Natsu's response to everything that was going on. Phantom Lord had a lot also. It obviously was about the guild and stuff, but at singular characters, Lucy. Natsu's response to what was going on with Lucy and stuff. Tower of Heaven. Urza. What was happening with Natsu's response to what was going on. Wendy. What was Natsu's response to what was going on. And then once we have Natsu having a bit, when you have Tartaros, you see like the shockwave of what happens when it's hitting everybody else, but it's hitting Natsu too, and it's like nobody was able to support each other because of just so many hard-hitting things happening at the same time. Whereas with Alvarez, I think because of what happened, they were able to stay stronger the next time. And now it's like they're staying, obviously, like they aren't letting personal things push them away from the group or the guild, but it's doing it in a way that's almost like a scale of balance. Natsu and Gray are each getting one thing on one side and one thing on the other, whereas like Wendy and Lucy are both getting these things relatively at the same time. Wendy and Lucy have both gotten fights and character development, both relatively within spans of time that are much more akin to each other as like you would expect. And then Urza's is like fights and then like every character thing is more spread up specifically with Jalal. So it's like hers is like her own like dual setup with Jalal that's different than the other people. He's got like different setups for everybody, and I like that, but at the same time it's frustrating from a time span of things thinking about it, you know. But other than that, other than that, I like it because it keeps everything for each character different, you know. It keeps everything kind of like flowing in its own style. Let me see how long of a time I like the next time we have a time skip. I think it'll be probably within, my guess is 6 months to a year and a half is my guess, just because like I feel like it would be like one of those like shorter or weirdly unique sets of time, a year and a half, 13 or 15 months or something. Anyway, I'm gonna call it good. We had a pretty fair stream. It was mostly a setup chapter. I was hoping for not to be a setup chapter, but my belief in what I was thinking it to be more of a setup chapter was we were going to be we were pretty much going to be having like, oh yeah, Sabretooth is now set up to like couple these fodder fights, or Minerva just trashes the, Minerva or Yukino or somebody trashes the camera guy, and then the Gajeel owners are out. That was the kind of thing I wanted to avoid. I didn't think we'd already be in Gold Owl's main city. I thought we would be fighting like maybe like two more different cities on the way there, but or maybe it's like they're getting there, but Rogue, because we only saw Rogue in the city, so it's like maybe Rogue could get there faster because he can move through shadows. Where it's like, oh yeah, he just throws into a shadow, he's able to move there because he knows the name or something, or he's able to kind of know the direction, something like that. But otherwise, we have more like of a direct kind of like, okay, events have moved, like direct story events have moved, so it's like it's more of a meaty setup chapter. And I can't really say for right now, but I do like the concept of the way that the old lady and the camera guy, to where it seemed like we saw those right before some form of lapse of time to where Rogue got in the city, to where we aren't supposed to see directly of what happens next with Urza, Jalal, and then Lucy and Happy, to where, something happens and we would have to see it in a flashback. I think it'd be really cool if characters again arrive in waves to help, and like the last wave is Lucy, and it's like, again, imagine if this lady has Aquarius's key, Lucy gets Aquarius's key, and then we have like, it's like, what if it's like, this arc over the city happens over a couple days. What if Lucy has like something crazy of her own happening, just like as a subplot, where it's like the lady is like, oh yes, I will sell it to you, and it's like a fair price, but you have to compete a trial. And it's like, I'm trying to think of who like it would be that would make it fun. It's like, if like as a plot twist, I feel like the only plot twist would be like, would make it really weird if this old lady was somebody else's, if it was Brandish. But it's like, he's like, oh, I'll sell you the key for, whatever disgustingly cheap price, but so you have to pass a test. But what if it's like, what if it is like an equivalent of like a hyperbolic time chamber, or like the 3-day Bankai training that Ichigo had, where it's like Lucy comes out stronger, and then she arrives as like a turning of the tides character, where it's almost like, she gets like a moment of shining, like show up in power kind of thing. I think that would be really cool. I would love something like that for Lucy, or like Gray, or some cool thing. I have a really long theory for Gray of why I'm hoping this becomes a Gray-centered arc. I kind of want to wait until, I'm going to work on it soon, but I'm hoping maybe by the time we get to it, or something soon, that we get some form of hint of Gray having some form of subplot in this arc. But we'll see.